Next, a look behind the scenes of number 10 Downing Street, the official residence and office of British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Last spring, the BBC followed the Prime Minister's press secretary, Alastair Campbell, through his daily routines and dealings with the British press. The program was released last July. It runs an hour and 20 minutes.
Over the past 3 months, we've been filming the battle between number 10 and the media from behind the scenes in Downing Street. In that time, Tony Blair's relations with the media have seriously deteriorated, and the whole question of spin has moved centre stage. It's early morning, and Alastair Campbell, the Prime Minister's press secretary, is talking to John Prescott, who's in Japan. The Deputy Prime Minister is joshing with a man who's often described as the real Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, I'll see you later. Bye.
What's he saying?
He was describing a dinner he'd had with some monks. You'll have to ask him, Michael. Oh, dear. No, he was literally describing a dinner he'd just had.
But why did it make you laugh so much?
Because it was John describing him eating food that he couldn't quite recognise. It was very Johnish.
Campbell describes himself as his master's voice. He's been Tony Blair's press secretary for the past 6 years, the last 3 of them in number 10. He says his job is to get the government's message out to the public.
Yeah, he literally just put the phone down on Tony.
In the Cabinet Office, there's now a special unit set up by the new Labour government that monitors the media round the clock. Campbell says the unit saves him hours a day, and it warns him of the arguments being used against the government. At 9 each morning, press officers and political advisers from across Whitehall attend a meeting with Campbell to try and ensure that they're in control of the political news agenda. They discuss what the Media Monitoring Unit has identified as the day's big stories.
Women. Disenchanted women desert Labour. Today's offering by the disillusionment industry. This presumably is based on not very much at all.
I don't think there's substantial research,
No.
just based on OLR presentation.
The meeting considers the grid of events drawn up by Campbell's Strategic Communications Unit. It includes what the government is doing and the other news stories that will be competing for coverage with TB, as the Prime Minister is known.
TB Frank Dobson. I need lines for the 11 probably to say what that's going to be. I don't know what it's going to be. Now, on the asylum race, I need all the stuff that we're actually doing and why. I think the other point we've got to keep making is that one, it's the system that we inherited, that's why we're making the changes, but secondly, there is a real problem that we're having to deal with. And I'll tell you, the latest figures on the assessment of what are genuine claims and what aren't, I need as well.
Campbell's deputy, Godric Smith, returns to the number 10 press office to tell his staff what subjects Campbell will need information on for his morning briefing with the political journalists at 11 o'clock.
There's a lot to get together for the 11 this morning. Asylum, I think, is going to be the main story for the day. Tanya, could you get lines on, what we're doing?
There are 7 civil servant press officers at number 10, one more than in the last government.
Yeah, it continues to be difficult, actually.
And there are also a further 6 political appointees who work on media matters with the civil servants.
Do we dispute the figures that are published in the Times?
In his office, Campbell receives the official lines garnered from across Whitehall by his press team. The subject that they feel will be top of the journalists' agenda is asylum.
Have we got any estimate on how many at the moment you think are genuine and how many aren't?
Well, if you take Kosovo in, then it's it's around 50%, but if you take all of that out, it's probably 70 to 80% are unfounded claims.
Take Kosovo out of the equation?
Yeah.
And it's 70 to 80 unfounded?
Yeah.
The political journalists arrive in Downing Street for the morning briefing. Campbell, a former political editor of the Daily Mirror, now regards his old colleagues as the enemy. Traditionally, the so-called lobby correspondents have jealously guarded the secrecy of their encounters with the Prime Minister's press secretary in the basement of Number 10. He was a shadowy figure, only identified as sources close to the Prime Minister. But Campbell has come out of the lobby closet. He arrives with his team of press officers, who between them cover every Whitehall department. He lists what the Prime Minister and government are doing that day, and then takes questions.
What is the Prime Minister's response to the Liberal Democrats reporting Labour's rhetoric? And will, on asylum, and will the local election campaign from Labour's point of view take account of what is happening on asylum seekers and the Conservative Party trying to make it an election issue?
Well, I think on the first thing is that the Prime Minister would never, ever allow the Labour Party to use that unpleasant, unfortunate phrase, play the race card. But there is a genuine problem that we have to deal with. If you take Kosovo out of the equation, then on the latest evidence, around about 70 to 80% of asylum seekers, their cases are not genuine asylum cases. That is a real problem. And where I think the Prime Minister takes particular exception with the Conservatives is the fact that they are making this the issue that they are, in the way that they are, having opposed us on the specific measures that we're trying to put forward to sort it out.
You're used on the point we're making.
You're surely, Alastair, trying to...
The point we're making is that you're saying that they're guilty of playing the race card.
No,
and using exactly the same expressions as your party has on the question of illegal racketeering, organised crime, influx of illegal immigrants, the figures you quoted this morning. They're no different to what the Tories are saying, but they somehow have come into the category of being racist.
Look, it's not my job to talk about...
Which is very bad for the whole debate.
Wait a minute, it's not my job to talk about the Conservative Party election manifesto.
It is if you're raising the issue.
I don't think, OK, I don't think you'd find the... It is about language, this, in the end. They talk about bogus asylum seekers flooding the country.
Which is what Barbara Roche is saying in terms.
No, what she's talking about are well-organised criminal rackets to get... Well, and... Wait a minute, and I've just acknowledged that a large proportion of them are bogus, right? No dispute about that.
Right, so we're halfway there.
Right, well, you're not actually halfway there, because we haven't got to first base yet. We haven't got to first base yet. No. We, in the national... The system that we've now got for national dispersal, again, as I understand it, opposed. Why is it opposed? Because, well, you asked them. But that is us dealing with a practical reality. No, it's not, but that is what we're having to deal with. That's what we're having to deal with.
Which part of the statement, bogus asylum seekers flooding the country, do you disagree with? You've already told us that bogus asylum seekers are coming in record numbers to the country, so presumably it is the word flooding. That's the only word in there that you can possibly disagree with. Look,
it appears to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, reading some of our public prints, I get the sense that the Conservatives have been out there, you know, could it be that there's been a bit of briefing going on to the effect that they see this as an important electoral issue for them?
Your own Home Office Minister, on television yesterday, says the Tories are playing the race card. Does the Prime Minister side with those comments, or does he disagree with them?
The Prime Minister, as I said, right at the outset, would never, ever allow the Labour Party to play the race card. Wait a minute, let me answer the question. I'll answer it in my way, not your way. And we have got, as the government, a real problem that we have to deal with and sort out, with precious little help from the opposition. And he certainly would say that they should be careful about the way that they engage in this debate, and that's all I've got to say about it.
Campbell's office sends the lobby briefing out across Whitehall so that ministers and officials can know what the number 10 line is, advise Campbell if he's got his facts wrong, and then the government can all sing from the same hymn sheet. And Campbell has now decided to make his lobby briefings public by putting them on the number 10 website. Lobby journalists see this as another example of his desire to bypass them and downgrade their privileged status.
The lobby think, or many of them think, that you're really out to get them, to get the lobby.
Well, I'm not. I mean, you know, I'm out to get the government's voice heard properly, as it is. I'm out to try to make sure that the public understand the reality of this government and this Prime Minister. That's what I'm out to get. And the press and the political press often, not always, but often, are the barrier to that. That means you've just got to constantly be thinking of ways of trying to get your message through to the public.
Britain's obligation to refugees that arise after...
The lunchtime news bulletins reflect what Campbell has said in his lobby briefing.
You say you're concerned, but the Prime Minister said apparently this morning that he would never countenance the asylum seekers issue treated in a racist way.
Well, it's not for me to sort of choose between the major political parties, but they both...
Along the corridor from the press office, there's a flap on. A VIP visitor for the Prime Minister is arriving ahead of schedule. Tony Blair is just in time to greet the President of Cyprus for the obligatory photo call outside number 10. In the afternoon, the action transfers to the Commons, where political journalists spend most of their time. Campbell's second briefing of the day is in a secret room at the end of a corridor, exclusively for the use of lobby journalists. The press secretary is the guest of the lobby in its room in a turret. The journalists claim that as part of his campaign to downgrade the status of the lobby, Campbell leaks government information in advance to favoured media outlets.
Are you happy that the government is working assiduously enough on mobile phones and the risk to health of young children, bearing in mind that it might be the next mad cow disease?
I mean, it's difficult for me to say anything because there's a report tomorrow, and when the report's published, we'll respond to it.
Is it not possible for you to say anything at all?
It isn't really because I don't know where.
That's sensitive, surely.
Is it on the Today programme?
No, it's not. It's because there's a report, and it is better that it's published and people see it rather than necessarily rely upon speculation.
The Daily Express, the Financial
Well,
Times.
Fine, yeah, they can,
BBC.
fine. Yeah, well,
Colin.
Not from me. No, look, there's a report tomorrow, and it'll be published, and there'll be a response to it.
Campbell likes to turn on its head the lobby's accusation that he is the Sultan of Spin. He claims it's the journalists themselves who are the real spin doctors and says that most of them never report straight what the government is doing.
The blurring of news and comment is such now that most news stories are in fact a form of comment. The Prime Minister makes a speech. Very rare that actually the headline will relate to what the Prime Minister has said. It will relate to an interpretation of it, and often one that is, when you read into the story, will be put there by an anonymous quote from somebody, real or imagined. And so I think that whole sort of sense of the newspapers and newspaper journalists actually taking what may be a fact, taking what may be a real event, but then putting their spin on it and making that the story, is what most modern political journalism is now about.
Political journalists aren't spin doctors, they're professional decoders. Politicians speak a strange language. Sometimes it requires decoding. There's a profession built on decoding what politicians say. And not surprisingly, when that happens, the way in which we decode these things are then challenged by Alastair. That's his job. He says, well, words weren't that remarkable. What are you lot on about? That's how you get these clashes. But our job isn't spinning. Our job is decoding. His job is spinning.
Today's indignant demonstrators.
Look, I just wanted to say on is this...
Yeah.
Right.
At the end of the day, Tony Blair visits his press secretary's office, where political mementos hang alongside paintings by Campbell's children.
Say that is an accurate description. It is ludicrous to suggest that serious politicians...
Do you often come to your press secretary's office?
I do if I'm passing, which I happen to be.
So how important is your press secretary to you?
Not at all.
How important is Alastair Campbell to you?
Of course, I mean, the press secretary is important for the Prime Minister. I mean, it would be odd if he wasn't, I think.
Yeah, but this particular...
Yeah, well, I mean, I like to think I've hired the best in the business. I hope I have, anyway. So, yeah, of course. But, a lot of twaddle's talked about it as well.
Yeah, but everyone says the importance you put on relations with the media is greater than it's been with any government in the past.
I think it's just modern government now. Look, it's a 24-hour-a-day news media. If a story comes out that says something and you haven't got the capacity to get on top of it and say, no, hang on, sorry, the facts are X and Y. And as you probably discovered, I mean, it's not as if, these stories don't take a life of their own and then start running away into the far distance, and then the public thinks, oh my goodness, what on earth are they doing that for, when you're not doing it at all. It's important to have the capacity to get on top of the news insofar as it's possible, but it's less important to us than I think it is in the way that people perceive it.
And when they say in the papers, you and Alastair Campbell spend your whole time thinking about how you're going to win the next election, everything is planned and worked out to be spun in that sort of way.
I mean, it's just rubbish. Well, it's like, well, I was supposed to have spent my holidays with them last year or something. I mean, much as I like him, but no.
So why do you think the press don't believe this? Are they corrosively cynical?
I honestly don't know, and that's for you to do. But what is important for me is that it doesn't disturb me from doing the things that are really important in the end, which are, the things for the country. Otherwise, there's no point in doing this job. And people can believe that or not as they like, but that's what I spend my time thinking of.
So why you just spent 7 minutes talking to Michael Cockerell?
It's absolutely true.
Downing Street is expecting a controversial visitor, the Russian President Vladimir Putin. In the press office, the visit will be the province of Julian Braithwaite, who's on secondment from the Foreign Office.
Julian, in terms of Putin, we just need to agree what it is we can say, particularly with the Express story today, in terms of timing of the visit.
There's the Chechnya debate tomorrow as well, which will play into all this, so that's why we want to try and sort of fuzz it until Wednesday.
Okay.
A Russian advance party recce's number 10 for the best camera angles when Putin arrives.
What we're supposed to do is to put an interpreter at the end of the corridor here, standing with the press people.
In the cabinet room, they're preparing for Tony Blair's weekly webcast.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 1.
Blair plans to use his internet broadcast to explain why he's invited the Russian president a month after seeing him in St. Petersburg, despite Putin's image as the butcher of Chechnya.
Right, OK, guys, when you're ready. Right. There is, of course, real concern over what is happening in Chechnya. Last month, when I met President Putin, I talked this through in detail with him. I can understand Russia's need to respond to the threat of force from extremists and terrorists, but I'm also clear that the measures taken should be proportionate and consistent with its international obligations.
The Chechnya obviously will be raised, and the Prime Minister will put the points of view that he put in St. Petersburg.
But is there a danger that he will just make the protest or express his concerns about Chechnya and then they'll just move on? But in fact, Putin will know he's going to say this. He'll then go on and say it for consumption here. But in fact, they won't really talk about it very much.
Well, they will, as they did in St. Petersburg. But what we won't do is allow the entirety of our relations with Russia and a new Russian president to be defined by one issue.
If we're seen as a soft touch by the Russians, that's all right?
Well, the Russians can speak to you themselves about how they see us, but I don't think there's any country that sees Britain as anything other than a nation-state that pursues its national interest very, very vigorously.
So, of course, I will take the opportunity of the visit to London to repeat our concerns clearly and frankly to President Putin. But I believe that the best way to ensure that Russia responds to these international anxieties is through engagement, not isolation. Got the usual technological problem, have we?
Again. The machine's got stuck this time.
I've got to do the whole thing again.
Wait, slow.
Have it really?
Sorry. Has it not come out?
No.
Are you serious?
I'm very
So why is
sorry.
it? Yeah. It was saying it was recording.
It was saying it was recording.
Flashing away. 0.
It's probably because it's...
I thought we were supposed to be on top of all this technology in this government. Right, well,
Sorry.
okay.
Right, whenever you're ready, sir.
I'm sometimes asked why so much of a Prime Minister's time is spent on foreign affairs.
Campbell discusses with the Russian ambassador how to get the best pictures of the two leaders.
When we were in St. Petersburg, the best pictures of the, well, in fact, it was of the four of them.
Yeah.
But it was in the...
when they were
up the steps.
up the steps.
Now, the reason for that, apart from the fact that it was a beautiful building, was that the security and the diplomats and the people like you and me, we all hung back.
Yes.
And I think that if you could just emphasise to, once we're in here, if you could emphasise to the security people,
yes, at certain times we have
they're relatively safe in here.
Both leaders together.
Yes.
Yeah.
The chap who's in charge of the team is the same one who looked after us in St. Petersburg.
Oh, fine.
So he knows this already. He's used to being asked to sort of get out of the way. So I think
because the
right.
impression from a crowd is sometimes not very welcome.
Well,
yeah. It's just
two leaders.
Messy and yeah.
That's why I will continue working at home and abroad to protect our security and promote British interests, jobs and prosperity.
Mission accomplished. Data saved. Thank you very much.
Can I just ask you how important you regard doing the webcast?
It's just a way of communicating directly with people. The more your words and language can come direct to people, the more they've got a chance of hearing a more extended argument. So if you're trying to talk about an issue, part of the difficulty is you get a very, very small segment on the news bulletin, but something like this allows us to use the new technology just to say, look, listen to more of a developed argument, and here are some of the things that we're trying to do, and I've benefited that way.
How many people hit your site, do you know?
I'm not sure, but it's a large number.
So it's about 4 million.
I didn't know it was as much as that, but that's pretty good.
It's the day of the Putin visit. Demonstrators in Whitehall are kept away from Downing Street.
One thing that is still slightly... Morning, Prime Minister.
Good morning. Morning.
With the media gathered outside number 10, the photographers seek assurances from one of Campbell's staff.
Marcus. Good morning, sir.
Will you be able to assure me that all of these people wandering around?
Yeah, they're all official people.
But they'll be cleared out the way when the arrival happens.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it would just get messy.
Yeah.
The President's arrival has been carefully choreographed to ensure good pictures.
The Russians are out there saying they'll hold them. So if you want me to go out, I will.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just take this.
Yes. Now, if by any chance the car overshoots the door, just see if you can, manoeuvre around it, please. It's a big car to try and move, but they've promised.
But the presidential limousine fails to stop at the agreed point.
They've stopped him very short. You better move towards him. Yeah. Right, close the door. Oh, no. Yeah, I'll try. What do you want me to do? Go and do it.
The problem is that Putin's interpreter seems determined to get into the picture and spoil the shot.
Marcus has lost the interpreter. I'll have to deal with this one. Oh, come on, open the door.
Yes, okay.
They're shouting.
Okay. I'm just going to go right down here, but
There's interpretation for him there. Right, I'm going to take the interpreter. You do
I'm
that.
an interpreter.
That's what I mean. Yeah, if you would come with me, I'll take you to...
With the entourage held back, there are clean pictures of the two leaders for the media.
Online
Across the road at the Foreign Office, journalists from many countries, including 40 Russians who've flown in with Putin, are gathering for the big press conference. Among the journalists is John Sweeney of The Observer, who's just back from Chechnya and is hoping to question President Putin about what he saw there. Sweeney isn't a member of the lobby.
Most of the other papers have bought the line, you know, the Alastair Campbell line, that Putin's a nice chap and we should do business with him and we've got to constructively engage him. And all I want to try and do is get one question in, and I'm not very hopeful.
The lunch in Downing Street has been cooked by the celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay, who'll feature in the next photo call.
Thanks so much. Not at all. Yeah, it's really great. Really enjoyed it. So much.
Pleasure enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic.
Good. Very good. A lot of English produce.
Yeah, no.
Chicken and ham and chocolate tarts.
The pictures of the two leaders with the colourful chef are aimed to appeal to a more general audience than just those who are interested in politics.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Right, this week?
Yeah.
Yep.
The two leaders set off for the press conference at the Foreign Office. And Campbell sorts out the procedure on choosing the questioners with Putin's press secretary.
How long do you want it to last? How long do you want to go on?
I believe that we should leave at 3:10.
Okay.
3:10 would be great.
So we do one Alexei call,
Yes,
we
yes,
call one.
absolutely.
Okay.
By the way, language is already preset and is on the shelf on the lectern.
Лежит это на полочке.
Я надеюсь, что там русский записал.
I hope that Russian is preset for you.
It is. It is indeed. Russian is on channel 3.
Третий канал русский, в случае чего.
И делайте на первый.
Next time, make sure that the Russian is on channel 1.
Do you want to
Okay.
do the Prime Minister?
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
This is already preset on the lectern.
So it's actually switched on, is it?
It is switched on.
So
at the
I
moment.
just put it.
Indeed, and it's just a
Okay.
single earpiece.
Jolly good.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.
Okay.
Right.
CPI will put out. President Putin said this morning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, there's one that it's already set.
I wanted to ask President Putin that there are many concerns in Britain and elsewhere about the conduct of the war in Chechnya and about his long career in the KGB. How does he propose to show people in the Western world that those fears are misplaced?
John Sweeney hears Putin claim that the Chechen rebels are international Islamic terrorists. At the Russians' request, Campbell and his opposite number choose which journalists to call. But Sweeney keeps trying to catch Campbell's eye. The press conference is drawing to a close.
It's best done in a quiet and patient and diplomatic way. Right. One last question, I think, is all we got time for. So, Trevor?
Trevor Kavanagh from The Sun. I have a question for President Putin. The world has learned the hard way that money poured into Russia to help.
Oh, it was richly comic. Alastair knows me of old. He knew where I was. He completely ignored me. They asked robust questions, but none of them would have the emotional hit, the emotional intensity that perhaps I or somebody else who'd been to Chechnya were able to say, well, listen, I've been there, I've seen it. An 8-year-old girl, is she an international Islamic terrorist? La-di-la. What about the modernising of Grozny, Mr. Putin?
No, I think if I'd have seen John, I wouldn't have had any trouble John Sweeney asking a question at all.
I mean, he believes that because you knew him, you recognised him, and
Well, he's
so
wrong.
on, that you knew he would ask a question that might embarrass President Putin because of all the emotion he felt about Chechnya, that you quite specifically ignored him.
No, well, that's wrong. And also, when we discussed in advance with the Russian people, they made no mention of not calling people who might be difficult at all.
You're not called because that would be moving it out of control. The control is for the lobby. If you're out of the lobby, then you're not welcome.
Well, if he wants to say that, it's entirely a matter of him. If it makes him happy, then, you know, I'm very happy that he's happy. But it's complete and total garbage.
Полезно, абсолютно точно полезно.
And absolutely, I'm convinced absolutely that it's been a useful job for all of us.
Well, it's a relationship I value very much.
The Putin visit receives mixed notices from the media.
Yeah. I can't be the first Prime Minister who sat there with their press people and said, well, what do you think the story's going to be? And, you know, how do we make the story what we'd like it to be, not what someone else would like it to be? Well, I think that's part of the daily life of being a professional politician. But I would be the happiest person in the world if I never had to give another thought as to what the presentation was.
That evening, there's a party in Number 10 for the lobby journalists and their partners.
How are you doing? We've met before, actually. The ITN man.
Yes, the ITN
we keep having to remember. We keep forgetting.
There was that terrible moment at the news conference the other day, but I thought you were very nice about that.
That's right.
There are Prime Ministers who would simply have denied it or say, no, you're still working with the BBC, get on with it.
We got so used to you being a BBC person.
Campbell and his partner, Fiona Miller, Cherie Blair's personal assistant, make sure that the Blairs circulate.
You're not getting a speech out of me. I've had enough of speeches today.
Much of the talk is about the impending new addition to the Blair family.
How do you do? Hello. I was with the President of Colombia the other day. And so he told me that he'd had 11 years or something between his second and his third or something.
I've got Alexander and Alexandra.
Videos, thank you very much. We will not be releasing edited highlights.
You've got so much business to do in that age.
We were all saying you were ruling the world at that point, weren't we? You had feet on the summit of every mountain.
Yeah. Well, we had the Commonwealth conference as well at the time, so that was
very enjoyable occasion. It's a Daily Telegraph. We don't often come through the doors of Number 10 under the new management anyway.
My assumption, which I'm sure you would regard as corrosively cynical, is that they hope to present themselves in a good light and to present us as malleable sheep summoned to the trough and part of their system.
Alastair Campbell is an unusual hybrid, part political appointee, part civil servant. But he's sensitive to any charge that he engages in Labour Party propaganda at the public expense. He's decided to take no public part in the forthcoming local election campaign and to concentrate on government business.
There we go. That was that's stuff that I had for the briefing just now on Russia. That's about our policy on drugs and what we're doing with the Colombians on that. And this is all. These are really just the lines that I've been using through the day on the different subjects. That's the briefing on President Putin's visit. So I shall keep that.
What's that one?
That one's the message script that the Prime Minister was talking to the Cabinet about this morning.
The message script?
Just, when he went through when they had the discussion about the local elections.
I don't know what the message script means.
It means this is what we're talking about in the local elections.
So the Prime Minister this morning went through the message script, giving the message to his fellow cabinet ministers as to what message they should put out in the course of the local elections.
No, he circulated. There was a document circulated about what the local elections were all about.
So what is the message?
Well, that's for the politicians to tell you.
Come on, I mean, you got it there. I mean, just this goes out after the elections. I mean, what is the message?
No, there's a. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the local election.
No, sure.
But we constantly writing and honing and changing according to what's happening. What you call, the big picture. We constantly talk about the big picture, but you've got to be setting it out the whole time. And part of the, just for my own preparations for briefings and what have you, you need a script. That's what I've.
Sure, but who is it? There's the message written there. Who is it who writes the message, works out the message?
It's you're working on it constantly.
Who's you?
We are. We're all are. Prime Minister down.
Tony Blair takes the message to Wales, where Rhodri Morgan now leads the Welsh Assembly. Although there's disillusion in Labour's heartlands, Rhodri, the former renegade, is now on message.
So what's the story, Rhodri?
It's health and heartlands, I suppose, isn't it? And that's the message really for the rest of this Parliament, I would have thought.
But the journalists warn that Blair's message will be competing for space against a sensational court case.
No, but there's the kind of Heartlands Middle Britain things news today.
It's a Sex in the Sky story.
What?
Court case.
Sex in the Sky story.
Life on Earth.
In Cardiff that evening, Campbell and Hilary Kaufman, one of his deputies, have a rare dinner with a group of lobby journalists. On the menu is the question of who controls the news agenda.
And I remember you saying to us that, you've got to be weaned off the idea that you get a politics splash every day. And I don't think you quite won that battle. But that is the battle. So I think it's moving back our way at the moment.
What do you mean there?
In that I think we're getting political controversy back on the front pages. There's now a debate raging again in the way there wasn't 12 months ago.
Your desire is this goes back to the point about stories, right? Your desire is just to put stories day after day after day. Our intentions are, for change. Which doesn't mean you can...
Change should produce stories.
Yeah, it does, and it does. But your definition of story is
different. You must admit that in the early days of Labour government, there was a tendency. If you had a problem, we'll set up a task force. We'll set some tough new targets. And you got an easy story there, and then we forgot about it for another 6 months. And now we're getting to delivery stage, and we're saying what's happened there. But you exploited stories for a while to actually kind of take the pressure off on various hot points.
No, we were implementing change, and you're right that we're now in this sort of delivery phase. So therefore, you're not kind of announcing new things every day, but there's a sort of desire and a demand for news, whatever news is.
Not sure, actually. What's news?
Yeah, what is new? I don't know. I mean, sometimes I do think we're kind of doing things, and I think, right, well, if that's not a story, I don't know what is, and then, nothing happens. And then other times, you go out and somebody will ask you a question, and you'll say something, you suddenly find it's leaving the news, and you haven't got a clue how it happened. Right?
What Alastair's brilliant at is deflecting something with a joke, or teasing the journalist who's asked a question. And, I've always said that he's, one of those bullies you want to be liked by. And even if he's taking the piss out of your best friend, you tend to laugh along, and it's a very effective strategy. Let's hope it's not me who's taking the piss out.
Rhodri's going to tell us about some of the changes that are happening here in Wales.
In Cardiff the next day, Blair holds a summit meeting with some of his cabinet colleagues and his chief ministers from across the devolved United Kingdom to launch a new initiative on the health service.
I think that's the best way that we fit the discussion together, if we can. And I think, guys, if you don't mind.
With cameras excluded after the initial photo call, the journalists wait as the health summit goes on for 2 hours. They're unconvinced there'll be a story in it for them.
Coming to Cardiff,
Mr. Prime Minister, I'm in charge. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's the Prime Minister, I'm in charge. I'm not bringing heads together.
So we'll get the Tony grab, and then we'll all go home.
Yeah.
God.
With no stories in our papers.
And Alastair was saying, we're going to give you something substantial, don't worry. We've got some... Which basically means we're not going to give you anything substantial.
Eventually, the Prime Minister turns up to brief the journalists, but he's on a very tight schedule.
There is the scope for massive reform in the NHS, but there also, by and large, as I found again when I visited 2 hospitals today, that healthcare staff and professionals are up for this change. What was good about today's meeting is the acceptance of reform all the ways round. You know, the money's gone in, but the reform's now got to follow. I really think, you know, with the business of waiting lists and waiting times, these are problems for people. You know, if you're waiting 18 months for a...
Can I just say, anybody who wants to come on the same train as us will have to leave now, I'm told.
So what, anyone else from Wales wanted to ask me a question?
The pledge you made at the last election on waiting lists, did that apply to Wales as well?
It applies to, you know, the overall figure for the whole country. And, I mean, you know, this is now a matter for the Welsh Assembly, but I don't doubt they want to do the same here. Thanks. Yeah. Okay, so we can have a more conversation on the train. Do I have a right to go?
What happens next with the joint ministerial committee? I mean, what you mean to me?
It's hardly, you know, hugely exciting stuff.
I'll speak to him about
really, really clear is that there's scope for massive
Has anyone got any
reform.
particular take on it?
And by and large, healthcare staff and professionals are up for the change.
Back in London at the Daily Mirror's Pride of Britain Awards, Blair talks to Piers Morgan, the Mirror's controversial editor.
Of course, what would you expect?
He likes to keep on good terms with the tabloids.
You just lead the way, as ever.
Stick close to him and you'll be more or less go completely wrong. I see most of the newspaper people every so often. And again, I should imagine every Prime Minister's done that. I look back at the Thatcher government and Saatchi and the huge efforts made to woo the media, including, I seem to remember, quite an array of knighthoods for various editors of newspapers. And everyone says, oh, well, that, you know, fair enough. You know, when we attempt to get on terms, as it were, with the newspapers, this is considered as some sort of, you know, great act of groundbreaking significance.
The Sun, which switched from the Tories to support Blair at the last election, is also a target for the charm offensive. The Sun's editor, David Yelland, sees the Prime Minister both in Number 10 and at Chequers, his country home.
It's a real privilege, you know. It really is a privilege to be, you know, to get to go to Chequers at all. I mean, you have to. The first time I ever went in there, I was probably far too nice to Tony Blair, and the leader I wrote the next day was probably far too nice, because you are. It's wonderful to be there, but you have to kind of, you can't be like that. And I've always wondered how much the Blairs really do like the tabloids. I mean, they, you know, I suspect they're not Sun readers. I suspect that an hour with me is probably about as much as they can probably bear.
Campbell himself goes to the offices of the Daily Express, a traditionally Tory paper, now sympathetic to New Labour. He wants to push Labour's health plan that had gone largely unreported in Wales. But the paper's editor wants to ask about Europe.
Where has Blair been in terms of really giving
let me send you
stories?
Let me send you the coverage that there was around Europe at the Lisbon summit, right? You would be amazed. And what the rest of Europe's media says about the Lisbon summit was this was the turning point for the European economy. Now, let's be honest, Tony Bevan's, you know, terrific journalist as he is, notwithstanding, there was precious little of that. There was in the FT, but there was precious little of that in the British media at the time.
Do you know why?
So,
Do you know why?
Go on,
Because it's jolly
go on, tell me.
slippery to get on.
Was what? You didn't spin.
Oh, right. So, spin.
No, hang on. No, just calm down.
Right.
I worked that out for myself.
Good. That's how it should be.
With Julian Braithwaite. I got all the documents. I dug them out of Number 10 and the Foreign Office all by myself. Okay? You didn't spin the other rat pack and tell them this is what is going on here. You didn't do it.
Well, look,
That's why they didn't write it.
Yeah. They didn't write about it because they were busy writing about, you know, robbing Cockerell on a different plane, as you were. Oh, fantastic. Oh, brilliant. Prime Minister's going to London and Robin Cook's going to Paris, and they went on separate planes. Wow. Eh? Oh, sorry. And Gordon stayed for a day, for a 2-day summer. I mean, you know, let's get a grip.
Well, we can say the same.
Can I ask you about a communications issue, which is your responsibility? I mean, aren't you, just between friends, aren't you embarrassed about the complete effing dog's dinner you've made of the London mayoral campaign?
Just between friends.
Yeah. Well,
it's been a very well.
I've just been paid to say there's a cab downstairs. Look, there is a difficulty for me in this, is that as Tony will tell you, some weeks ago I just said I'm not getting involved in the... Well, it is quite difficult, because, you know...
Well, if that's the, is that the reason why? Because you haven't been involved?
No, I mean about sort of... Look, I'm not going to pretend...
Because it's a fiasco.
Look, I'm not going to pretend that it is the, you know, it's been the most fantastic spectacle.
Frank Dobson's mayoral campaign has turned into a walking PR disaster.
See some pensioners in Kensington. It's all right, guys, come on. I mean...
And Labour is facing heavy losses in the local elections. Campbell is busy on a different issue that he hopes will produce good news. Tom Kelly, his opposite number in Belfast, rehearses with him how to respond to questions on whether May the 22nd is still the deadline for the IRA to decommission its weapons.
No particular deadline that we have.
So what about May 22nd?
May 22nd is there. It is an important date, but the agreement remains the only viable show in time. The principles underlying the agreement remain the only show in time. Therefore, let's see where we are by May 22nd. Well, let's not get ahead of us.
So May 22nd is not a deadline?
May 22nd is an important date, but let's face that issue.
It's not a deadline?
Let's face that issue if we get to it. We hope to make progress before then.
Right.
What's this line about not planning for failure? You could even go back to, you know, difficult but doable.
Right. Okay. I mean, the message from the Prime Minister is very much that, yes, there are difficulties, but where we are, even with those difficulties, we have made considerable progress, and he continues to believe that we can make further progress.
Do you still see May the 22nd as the date, though, when you have got to have an agreement on how you're going to get it implemented?
Look, I mean, you know, May 22nd, as you know, is an important date. I'm just not going to speculate on what if, when not. Well, it's just not sensible for me to get into. I've said what we think about May 22nd. It's an important date.
Wow. The world doesn't need any more photographs of me.
In a last-ditch attempt to stop Ken Livingstone in London, both the Mirror and the Express have backed Steve Norris. The first time the pro-Labour Mirror had ever said vote Tory.
Tony Blair is going to Northern Ireland today to try to get the peace process moving again. David Eads is our correspondent there. Is it definite about him visiting yet, David?
I think the one certainty is that Tony Blair will be in Northern Ireland from tonight and probably a good part of tomorrow, which would mean, of course, he wouldn't be in London for the announcement of the mayoral result.
Oh dear, I'll bet that'll upset him not being here for that.
Blair and his entourage arrive at the back entrance of Hillsborough Castle to avoid the media. Campbell has learnt that reporting in Belfast has its own dynamic.
Alastair in the past has come here and it's found it quite difficult in terms of the media here, certainly in the early days, because the problem for him is that there is no control of the information in the peace process in the way that perhaps the government can control other elements.
The journalists here are very, very clued up on the story, so you're dealing with a different level of specialism, whereas the political press at Westminster, they move in and out of stories the whole time, different issues, different stories. Here, they're very, very focused on one story. I think the other big difference is that the mindset of most journalists at home in relation to most of the stories that they are dealing with is that, you know, things going wrong is usually a better story than things going right. Here, I mean, Tom knows better than I, but my sense of the journalists here is that they are most of the time hoping that things will go right. And that is a different, completely different atmospheric that you're dealing with.
About 9 months ago, the last time the Prime Minister was here, we knew there wasn't going to be a deal. Alastair was at one point at lunchtime on a particular day saying the two governments can now sort of formally announce that there is a deal. And I recall going on television like a lot of other journalists and saying, regardless of what the Prime Minister's press spokesman says, there is no deal, there will not be a deal, because our sources within the wider peace process and with the party leaders who count indicate to us that this is not going to be sold by David Trimble to his people, and so it turned out.
This time, Campbell has decided to play it safe with the media. He and Kelly are maintaining strict radio silence about the chance of arms decommissioning.
I therefore declare that Kenneth Robert Livingston is duly elected the first Mayor of London.
Livingston's trouncing of Dobson is matched by heavy Labour losses in the local elections across the country.
Well, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted 14 years ago.
Across the water in Belfast, Blair faces the press.
Right, good morning everyone. If I can first of all say a word or two to you on the election results from last night. I mean, obviously there were some bad results for us in the country, although there were also some good results in different parts of the country as well. But of course we accept those results fully.
Do you regret saying that Ken Livingston would be a disaster for the capital?
Look, there's no point in me hiding from you my views about Ken Livingston. I haven't changed those views.
Campbell feels it's time to move on to Northern Ireland and suggests as much to a BBC reporter.
I've made a verdict clear, and it's my responsibility to make sure that it now works for London.
Prime Minister, it's been a very bad morning for you in terms of what's going on in England. Is there going to be a happy ending here at Hillsborough?
Well, shall I deal with any other questions on the local stuff and then...
Can we just ask, is it closely with Ken Livingston for the good of the capital?
I think it's very important that we do everything we can as a government, and I accept my responsibility as a Prime Minister to make this work for London. Anything else on the local elections that I come to? Yeah, sorry, you...
Bad day so far. Is it going to get any better?
Well, I really don't know. I'll be in a better position to tell you that later, and I promise I will say something later today as well.
Thanks, Alastair.
You were using
I wasn't.
I was not. I was trying to get him to do it, but he chickened out. He wouldn't catch my eye at all.
Humiliation live on air. Courtesy of Alastair.
It was a nice try. No. Your bravery will be...
Thank you very much indeed.
All right.
When's the Queen's next honours?
In an attic room at Hillsborough, Campbell and Kelly know there's now a real possibility of movement by the IRA over arms, but they feel they must keep the journalists down below in the dark.
The other good thing is that out there, they're not expecting anything much this afternoon.
I mean, these guys don't actually think there's anything happening, really, do they? No.
Lunchtime said, Prime Minister said steady progress, but raised no hopes of an imminent breakthrough.
Yeah.
And that's where they are.
Yeah.
So, and that's where we want to keep it.
Campbell has decided to do a lobby briefing by telephone for the Sunday papers in London, although he won't tell them anything about the IRA.
Thanks, Alastair. Can you put me to the through to the briefing room?
On the line.
Oh, so you're live to the Sunday lobby?
Joy.
Presumably you and the Prime Minister and Peter Mandelson stayed up and watched it, did you, at the BBC or Sky or somebody?
I'm afraid we didn't know. No, I watched a bit of it.
And the Prime Minister was in meetings till just gone 1 o'clock and then went to bed.
So who brought him the news particularly about Ken, I guess?
I don't think there was necessarily any need for the news to be brought, Michael. I think it was probably fairly well settled in his mind before the result, what the result might be. But, you know, he's responded to to that, and he's now back dealing with Northern Ireland. But I know you have to fill sort of
8 pages of the week from hell and all the rest of it, but I don't...
Yeah, the week from hell. Thanks. The week from hell.
Yeah.
That was the headline in I think it was the Observer last week, and you're all carrying it through, but there we are.
Why, is that not true? Been a lovely week, has it?
Well, I think, as I say, I think you've got to, put these genuinely in their perspective.
There were good results for us, there were bad results for us, there were good results for the Tories, there was one in particular very, very bad result for the Tories.
Does the Prime Minister accept that he is to blame for part of the mishandling of the London mayoral election?
Well, he accepts, as I do, that as part of your 8-page pullout,
you've got to do a great sort of, inquest full of the usual one insider said sort of nonsense about,
quotes the blame game, but it's not a game that we intend to play. Anything else? Okay.
In Belfast, the talks drag on, with the news blackout continuing.
In the words of one spin doctor here this evening, these talks have an equal chance of either concluding successfully or collapsing.
Just before midnight, the breakthrough comes. The IRA's offer on arms leads the Sunday papers, with the election post-mortems confined to the inside pages. But the first edition of the Sunday Telegraph claims an exclusive, alleging it was Campbell and Blair's pollster Philip Gould who persuaded the Mirror and the Express to back Steve Norris.
The story was just completely and totally wrong in every aspect. It talked about meetings that never took place. It talked about opinion polls that didn't exist. I mean, the idea that I, as, you know, one with my history with the Labour Party, two with my history with the Daily Mirror, would take any joy whatever in seeing Vote Tory, Voice of the Mirror. I mean, forget it. And yet, there it is, black and white, that's the story. Now, and it's out, it's on the streets by the time we knew about it.
When he saw the first edition, Campbell and his lawyers contacted the paper and threatened to sue for libel. In later editions, the story was changed completely and all references to it removed. The Telegraph issued an apology and declines to comment further on its original story that had been sourced to a Labour insider.
One of the reasons why I went on the record as the Prime Minister's official spokesman is because you were spending so much of your time, and the Prime Minister was, he was having to sort of say to colleagues that all this stuff about sources close to me and the rest of it is complete nonsense. And it is, you know. So you go on the record, and yet still the papers are full of a source, a friend, an insider, and all the rest of it. And in my view, I mean, none of us can know for sure, but it is my considered opinion that a very substantial selection of those are simply made up.
Alastair's accusation does not wash. If you want to get to the heart of what's going on in a government, you've got to approach people you know and trust. They have to know and trust you. They'll tell you what's really going on, but you've got to guarantee them anonymity, because otherwise you can lose a minister his job. And that's why so often political reporting is peppered with these phrases: a senior government source, a middle-ranking minister said. Sometimes you don't put names to the claims because it's the only way to get at the truth.
I just feel there's a sort of...
Blair gives regular interviews to women's magazines as part of Campbell's deliberate attempt to circumvent the lobby journalists and reach a different audience.
Now, you obviously love working with women. You've got a great backup team here.
Yeah.
Has it got anything to do with gender, or is it just because of the people that they are?
It is because they're excellent at the job, obviously. I do enjoy working with women. And
What do you think about the way that women dress at work?
oh, I think that's great. I think it's one of the tyrannies of modern life that men have to dress in conventional suits the whole time.
Well, I'm sure you could wear a skirt. I mean, you know, you make the rules.
I think that would certainly be a story. And there are some precedents. In fact, you know, all these pop singers seem to wear skirts now.
Campbell condemns the lobby for treating politics as soap opera. But Cherie Blair's surprise pregnancy had given the whole media the soapiest of stories.
We are more or less on permanent baby watch, and it's really a bit of a nightmare for us because, like any baby, its arrival is completely unpredictable in the lap of human nature. So there's been all sorts of reports that Mrs. Blair is going to have an elective caesarean, in which case she could go in any time now.
Cherie Blair appears for a photo call at a Downing Street Caribbean reception. But the press office is giving nothing away. What happens when you talk to Alastair Campbell and say, come on?
Well, I don't know. To be honest, I don't tend to have long conversations about this topic because Alastair is a sort of Praetorian guard in protecting the family's privacy.
Great thing we realise that everyone's more interested in photographing
We have had conversations with people in Number 10 where we say, look, you know, let's try to come to some arrangements. And so far, the only response we've had is to be reassured that no sneaky-beaky deals will be done, if you like, that there'll be no buy-ups or sell-outs, and, you know, the baby won't be treated as a commodity, heaven forfend, in that sort of way. But we're just in the lap of the gods. But it is a very, very touchy subject.
As the BBC learns to its cost when it follows up newspaper reports about Cherie Blair.
Number 10 is getting ready for the arrival of the new baby Blair, but details of the preparations, not surprisingly, have been closely guarded. Among those involved is reported to be an alternative therapist who advises Sherry Blair on relaxation techniques.
She's got nothing to do with the, quote, preparations for the birth of the Blair's baby.
Are you going to complain about the Sunday Telegraph newspaper report?
Well, I've already. Well, yeah, there are newspapers. Well, fine. If that's where you want to go, if that's the standards you want to pursue, you carry on doing it. No, I won't wait a minute. We'll deal with it how we have to deal with it. We get used to letting all sorts of things go, and we let them go, right? But I think sometimes when you get the mainstream BBC 6 o'clock bulletin peddling that kind of rubbish, then I think, you know, we've got to say something. If we took up every single thing in the papers that was garbage and dealt with in that way, it would do nothing else.
Well, I don't remember Labour getting upset with jokes about Margaret Thatcher's electric shock bath treatment. In fact, you probably wrote them. I don't remember you getting all outraged about.
Well, excuse me, but when all that stuff was going around, you go and find a place where we ever exploited anything to do with, you know, with well, actually it's different because they were older, with children. If the BBC wants to sort of equate itself to the Daily Mirror and the Sunday Lobby, fine, it can get on and do it. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
The BBC acknowledged it had been wrong to run the story in the form that it did.
And is the Downing Street baby on its way?
With Number 10 saying it wouldn't give a running commentary on the birth, Sherry Blair had arrived at the hospital without any of the waiting photographers getting pictures.
Downing Street are sticking mantra-like to their line that we won't say anything until we've got something to say. So there are no facts. We have to not make it up, but spin bricks without straw on a few facts. I think Downing Street are probably loving the attention. The fewer facts you feed to the hounds, the more curious they become.
The photographer's quarry now is the father-to-be, expected to arrive in the family Ford Galaxy.
It's a grey Galaxy.
That wasn't a grey Galaxy.
That wasn't. That was. He's in a grey. Mike, did you get it?
Right, yeah.
Only just, I think.
Oh yeah, got it.
Yeah, got it. Bingo.
The boy has
done good. I'll have one of those, yeah?
Well, you want one? Okay, fine, no problem.
Did anyone get it?
There's a couple of snappers got some vaguely usable stuff. Oh, never mind, maybe one shot. Never mind.
The real difficulty in the last few days has been trying to draw a balance between what is clearly, as you've seen, massive media interest, which does reflect you know, the interest of the general public as a whole, and the family's desire for perfectly legitimate privacy. And the other part of the equation is, you know, you just know that there are people waiting there saying they're now trying to exploit this, and sort of treading that line has been very, very difficult.
With no facts to go on, the journalists fill the vacuum.
We are all speculating that Cherie is going to have an elective caesarean, which means it's been planned in advance. Her baby's due in 5 days' time anyway, so it's not unreasonable to suppose that she might have the caesarean either tonight or tomorrow. So I think perhaps we'll hear something in the next sort of 24 hours.
And what's the basis for your speculation that she's going to have an elective caesarean?
Just good old journalistic guesswork.
Well, yes, as you say, Mark, a huge press posse likely to be here all night, as we will be as well.
Downing Street, the next morning.
As the world awoke to news of the Prime Minister's newborn son.
Workmen dig up the road and the first flowers for the new baby arrive, sent by the News of the World.
We have facts. Facts have made...
Only 3 of them, at least they're facts.
Yeah,
yes.
They are facts. They're good facts.
At least we now know that the baby is 6 pounds 12 ounces. We know that he was born at 12:25 this morning, and we know his name is Leo. And we can be fairly certain he's got blue eyes, because all babies have.
That's quite enough to go on now. We can stitch it all together now.
I think so.
Absolutely wonderful.
To pad out their story, the Sunday People had quickly gone off and bought a lion for Leo. With Campbell nowhere to be seen, the new father at last emerges, mug in hand.
Shireen, first of all, we'd just like to thank everyone who sent their good wishes and the flowers and the presents. It's been very kind of people. Shireen, the baby are absolutely fine.
Could you hold out that mug? It looks like a family photograph.
These are the existing ones, yeah. Well,
that's the existing thing.
What about the mug that the Prime Minister came out with?
What about it?
Well, everyone. It is suggested that this was a carefully staged event.
Well, I suspect it was the mug that he was drinking out when he had tea out of when he went out. And I was at home, so the first time I saw it was on the television.
You know, you do this technology now where you take a picture and you can put it on a mug, and someone's given us a whole lot of them. So I'm coming out, right, and I'm putting my tea bag in the cup, and the first cup I took out was one of the kids. But I don't think it was it just absolutely amazes me how these things become a sort of great, no doubt we sat there and discussed for sort of 1.5 hours what mug I should take out, my tea. I mean, how much? It's an entirely plain mug at the moment I've got in my hand. The significance of that, it's crazy stuff.
Public suspicions about Spin and Campbell's role intensify after Blair's return from paternity leave. He's set to make a speech to the Women's Institute, and Campbell trails it heavily as a government relaunch.
I've spent a long time trying to work very hard on the National Health Service. Thank you very much. To try and make sure.
Ministers speak out of politeness.
Thank you very much.
Some women walk out in protest at what they see as their conference being used as a political platform.
But it's just many of the staff and the ambulance. And there are big challenges ahead, but I think with the right spirit and the right shared purpose, we can meet those challenges and succeed. Thank you very much indeed.
Prime Minister, thank you for giving us some of your time today to speak to us. It has been a unique experience for us.
This was a speech which Alastair, in classic fashion, hyped up in advance. He ensured that the expectation, the burden of expectation placed on this speech was tremendous. That made the problem all the worse when the speech fell flat.
Good evening. Tony Blair's big speech today to 10,000 members of the Women's Institute turned into a public relations disaster.
But what's your reaction when you get those sorts of almost universally in both the press, television, radio, said it was a disaster for you?
Well, it's not that. It's, when you see something like that coming, you're not your first instinct in the morning is not to pick up the morning papers, as it were. But if you start letting it dominate or dictate your life, I think you stop doing the job of Prime Minister well.
God, it's all men.
With the WI speech still making headlines, Campbell briefs the Sunday lobby.
One woman. Right, far away.
How would you characterise the Prime Minister's disaster?
Every week has its moments. I wouldn't characterise it as very different to most weeks, to be perfectly frank.
You would or you wouldn't?
I wouldn't. I mean, he's the Prime Minister. He's got a lot of things to do and he does them. How would you characterise it? Is it his blackest moment
yet?
Well,
I don't think it's been a triumph of press management.
I don't know. The idea that a few women getting up and walking out of a speech somehow represents a sort of seismic shift in, quotes, Middle England, I think is absurd.
Well, wouldn't you accept that what happened this week is actually symbolic? It's rather like, it's not the politics of it, it's like Neil Kinnock falling into the sea. It actually is one of those things that stays with you forever.
Well,
because it represents Middle England and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't buy it at all, I'm afraid. I think, I have read some guff in my time, but this week, comparing it...
You haven't read what we've written yet.
I'm on pretty high guff alert for the weekend, that's true. But, comparing it to the poll tax riots and, you know, the ERM and Ceausescu's fall. I mean, it's pathetic.
The WI speech, you guys were briefing on Saturday.
No, it wasn't.
The issue was that this
No, it
week
wasn't.
the priority was going to be on,
excuse me.
The priority was going to be on health. There were preview reports in the daily newspapers during the week about what was going to be in the speech. So you can't say that you guys weren't trying to give an indication of what he was going to say.
And nor do I feel I should have to apologise for that, given, as I say, that. I mean, as I say, only half in jest do I point out that last Sunday, several of you guys wrote completely inaccurate stories about what the speech was going to be about, not based on anything we said. Now, I did brief on the speech last Tuesday, but again, I'm not denying that we want to get out what the Prime Minister says and thinks and does. But all this kind of accusations that are made against it, it's all spin and the rest of it, I really do believe this. I think, you know, you guys are the spin doctors and we just get on and do what we have to do.
What you sound like is kind of bizarre mixture of you either think this is a huge joke or you're bloody angry. And
I don't think either. Neither are true.
You sound angry.
I don't accept that just because a load of newspapers say something, that makes it real. I don't accept that just because the entirety of the British press describes something in a certain way...
You might not accept it, but the people who read the newspapers...
No, well, that's where I think you're wrong. I think you've got two things here. I think you've got media opinion and I think you've got public opinion. I think you've got media land and I think you've got the real world. And I think media land loves all this stuff. Of course you do. I mean, you know, it's... nor am I suggesting that, you know, you shouldn't think it's interesting and write about it and the rest of it. I'm not saying that. But in the real world... And I think, if I can be frank, I think we are more rooted in the real world than a lot of people who are on newspapers. In the real world, they are interested in the economy and jobs and health and education and crime and welfare and transport. They are the things that we're obsessed about. And that's why you can have as many, you know, thousands of words devoted to your post-mortems as you want, but there won't be one going on in here.
But now Campbell's own role comes up for reappraisal. The Sunday Times carries a leaked memo from Blair's private pollster that shows many voters see Blair as all spin and presentation. And in what looks like a symbolic gesture to show that the government is cutting back on spin, Campbell withdraws from the front line.
Without Tony Blair, this country is doomed. That's what you want.
Zimbabwe.
The spin, which played such a central role in Labour's election strategy, is now seen as part of the problem. So Alastair Campbell is going to spend less time briefing daily journalists and more time on long-term strategy.
You've taken a step back from the lobby briefing.
No is the answer.
No, but you are cutting down on the number of lobby briefings you're giving.
How do you normally get interviews? You phone the press office and we say yes or no, and I'm saying no, OK? Right. I think we had, and I particularly had got myself into a situation where kind of combat was the only language that was really being spoken, which, you know, not necessarily terribly sensible either way.
Well, I don't know what he's told you, but actually I decided some time ago that it was sensible for him, just because of the sheer pressure of work, quite apart from anything else, to step back from doing all the lobby briefings every day. Because I think it's, you know, otherwise he can't also look at, you know, how we're actually trying to get the government's message across, or what we're saying in a broader sense, because he's just sitting there, as it were, you know, doing his equivalent of Prime Minister's questions twice a day. So it was as prosaic as that.
You decided it?
Yeah, I thought it was important that he should do it.
Yeah.
Well,
back you go.
Campbell offers his old seat to his predecessor, Sir Christopher Mayer.
I'm on very good form.
Presume you said...
Mayer, who was John Major's press secretary, is now British ambassador to Washington.
I just want to feel the vibrations of power as I sit down here. Is it the same chair?
Yeah.
Is it?
It is.
Hello?
Vera!
Hey, what have you done to your hair?
Vera is in love with Christmas.
How are you, Vera?
I'm very well, thank you.
Thank you. Very much. Go on. We do too here. At least. Never mind.
Lovely to see you.
Lovely to see you. Feels strange to see you.
You just make us at home.
I will. Every press secretary has its dream. The dream is to be proactive, to seize the agenda every morning, to dominate the agenda throughout the news cycle, always to anticipate what is coming.
always to hold the initiative. And quite often you can do it. And good press secretaries with a good press machine are able to do that quite a bit of the time. But inevitably, you get pushback by events. You cannot control events in the outside world. And so a lot of it is counterpunching. You would like to be able to lead with your left without anybody expecting it, and sometimes you can, but a lot of the time it's bobbing, weaving, and ducking, counterpunching. And that's in the nature of the job, and it certainly happened in my case. Alastair has experienced the same.
Good evening. Labour's been hitting back at their millionaire supporter Ken Follett after he accused Tony Blair of relying on spin doctors and using secret briefings to undermine certain ministers. His comments were all the more surprising because he's been a close ally of Mr. Blair.
Campbell dismisses Follett's allegations as a self-indulgent rant, but Follett has once again turned the media spotlight onto Campbell's backstairs role, with his charge that the number 10 spin doctors are the rent boys of politics, anonymously whispering poison against Mo Mowlam and Gordon Brown.
One of my kind of golden rules, I'll never say anything critical about a minister. There may be situations where you actually think that something has gone wrong, but the last thing I'm going to do is go and sort of, you know, blast a minister.
The famous instance used about you is when you said about the Chancellor that he has psychological flaws.
Well, it's not true.
It's not true?
No, it's not true.
You didn't say that?
No.
Really?
No. Yeah, absolutely not true.
You did not say that?
No.
You surprised me.
Well, there you are. You get surprised by a lot of things, Michael.
But the journalists now declare open season on Campbell. They claim he's now become a liability for Tony Blair and that his days are numbered. Both Blair and Campbell dismissed the journalists' attacks as froth, reflecting the media's own obsession with itself. Campbell says that though he's cut back on lobby briefings, he's still fully engaged in getting the government's message across.
Schroeder and I are going to do a doorstep, aren't we?
Yeah, probably at the beginning.
Yeah.
You actually say what you're going to say tomorrow, or...
I don't want to preview it, really.
No, but in fact, the point you're going to make is the point that you probably want to make anyway.
Yeah, what do you mean in order to... No, because if Europe is the only thing reported out of my speech tomorrow, it's a bit of a nuisance, really, because it's not primarily about Europe. But I don't know. We may not be able to avoid that.
Lobby journalists now feel that Campbell's decision to hand over most of the daily briefings to his deputy Godric Smith has backfired.
From Alastair's point of view, I would have thought, since he backed out of the lobby, he's been in the headlines more than ever. From the point of view of the day-to-day conduct of government business, this morning's lobby was a pretty good example of how it's not working very well either.
I don't read it unnecessarily.
I think that what's happened is there's now a vacuum in the relationship between the press and Downing Street, which is very dangerous for the government, not for the press. We will continue to fill our column inches with news about politics and about Tony Blair and about Downing Street. But instead of having Alastair, who is a very skillful operator there at the interface, we have someone who we like very much but doesn't have the access or the authority that Alastair had.
If Alastair is not there with that kind of access that he has to the Prime Minister, reflecting the Prime Minister's instincts and personality as well as the policy lines, then we simply don't believe that we're getting the voice of Downing Street.
Then the question begins to arise, what is Alastair Campbell for?
I just wonder if you think that because of this extraordinary focus there has been on you recently and about your own role, whether you've actually become a liability for the Prime Minister.
No, I don't, because I have a very, very close relationship with him. And my dealings with the press are just part of the job. And I think that over time, believe me, the real message of this government is going to get out. And the real record of this government is going to get out. And I'll be part of that. So the stuff about me, it just doesn't, it doesn't faze me, it doesn't worry me. They can pump it out all they want, because in the end, I do what I'm doing because I believe in what I'm doing and because I think it matters, and I'll keep on doing it. Sorry. Hello. Okay, where is he?
Alastair Campbell and Tony Blair continue to believe that they're more spinned against than spinning. But the sureness of touch in managing the media that had until recently been such a feature of the new Labour government seems at present to have deserted them. Now, almost whatever the government says or does, most of the media and much of the public ask,